So just to finish up now, in terms of, there's always three kind of main areas that we deal with when we're looking at any kind of project, whether it's coaching gymnastics or doing a project like this. There's the theoretical, the technical, and the practical. And that actually goes back to my physical education background and the Canadian coaching certification program. So when you're certified to be a coach in Canada, those are the three big main areas that you focus on. And so what we've looked at so far really is all of the kind of theoretical concepts and ideas behind what we're doing. But just in terms of technique and practicals and practice, a couple of things to just kind of wrap up. So the techniques that we're looking at is how do you apply these chemicals to the materials, to the metals, or how do you get the chemicals to affect the metal? So one of the simplest and easiest ways is to just pour it on or to brush it on. And I've kind of played around with both of those techniques. The sort of a key practical consideration with that as well is to have a level surface when you're doing it. But sometimes that's not actually essential either, because you can get some really cool effects that happen as the chemicals and the liquids kind of pour around. You don't need a big volume of any of these products as you're working on this. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just pour it right onto the surface of the metal. What I do though is, in terms of the practical side, is particularly with the steel, I try to clean it off with an anti-grease cleaner, so that there's no grease on the steel surface itself, and then that allows the oxidation to start happening immediately. And these effects start immediately, you guys. As soon as you put these chemicals on, within just a few minutes, you start to see the color changes in the metal, which is great. So that's one of the considerations. Another one is particularly when you're dealing with the copper and you're using ammonium, to have good ventilation, because it's quite a strong product. Not something that I would do with younger kids unless they were really highly supervised. One of the things that I mentioned, that I talked about in the techniques, though, different ways of applying it, and a vapor bath with ammonia is one of the ways to really get some very cool effects from the copper. It's basically like taking a giant plastic tub or Tupperware container with a lid, and you put the copper in there, and you just put in either a rag dipped in ammonia or just a glass with a small amount of ammonia poured into it over to the side, and then you just seal it. And within an hour or so, you start to get the changes very. With the vapor bath, you get a lot of more blues rather than greens with it, so as you can get some very beautiful effects from it. But again, it's a very strong vapor, so you need to make sure that there's good ventilation with that. So these are the products that I've been using, and they work really well. And they're just things that you can buy at any drugstore, basically, or drogeria. The only one that's maybe not that common is the ammonia. It's a cleaning product. The one caution to always, when you're dealing with any kind of chemicals, whether it's in a laboratory at home, is to make sure that you're not mixing chemicals that should not be mixed. And one of as part of my research for this, one of the things that had come up with was a lot of caution about making sure you never mix ammonia with bleach, because they can cause fire. Actually, they can be explosive, so you have to be very careful with that. But everything else is very simple and straightforward. It's just white vinegar, soy sauce, salt, hydrogen peroxide, and then the two on the end there, the KH7, that's just for cleaning grease or whatever. And then what I do oftentimes once I'm finished a picture is I seal it with a varnish of some kind of spray varnish, or a hand brushed one. And part of the reason for that, although it's an aesthetic choice, is to stop the oxidation process or the corrosion process, because there's no more reacting with air, and so the process will stop. If you don't do that, and I've had this happen to some pieces, the piece can continue to corrode, which can have some really interesting kind of conceptual aspects integrated into the image if you're looking at that. Things like aging and deterioration, whatever. But those, so it's very, very simple, very basic, the materials that you use. Here's an example of a vapor bath. And so this is actually, when I took this photo, I have one piece that's in there already. And then I was working on a copper piece and a steel piece that I just put on top of them. So it's just very simple that you can get quite cheaply. Here are two pieces that I just started last night. They're both a little bit wet. I was going to actually hold them up to you, but I realized that they're still not completely dried. But this is less than 24 hours since I poured the metals. One thing that I'm noticing now, and I'm not sure it's because maybe I just didn't let it dry. The piece on the left, the copper, I cleaned it first with the anti-grease solution, but maybe I didn't let it dry completely. So during the during the corrosion process, I see that there's getting some streaks on the copper background. Whereas with the steel, that doesn't happen. And one thing that you can try that also works really well, particularly with the steel, is to rub it down a little bit with either sandpaper or with steel wool. And what that does is it allows the surface to get a little bit more teeth and cause the chemical processes to start reacting more quickly. So basically, in terms of which chemicals go where, I've got it written down there. So what works really well with the copper is just a blend of ammonia, salt, and vinegar, and you can mix them in whatever proportions. I just end up just pouring or squirting them on. This piece right here that you're looking at is done just out in the air. It's not in the vapor bath. Had I put this in the vapor bath, then the colors would be tending more towards the blue range, which is quite really nice. And then the other one is just a mixture of salt, vinegar, and hydrogen peroxide. And something I forgot to add, the copper one also has soy sauce in it. So there's those four. There's soy sauce as well as ammonia, salt, and vinegar. And with the steel one, there's just salt, vinegar, and hydrogen peroxide. Great. So that's basically this side of the whole thing, the technical and practical side of things, and hopefully you'll end up getting some nice pieces of work out of this.